On May 19, 1983, Diane Downs and her 3 children were shot on Old Mohawk Road in rural Oregon. Police scoured the crime scene for months, searching for the weapon, a .22 caliber gun that killed Cheryl, paralyzed Danny, and wounded Christy and Diane. The gun was never found. Police claimed early on in the case that Diane Downs was responsible for the shootings of her children. But publicly, she voiced her innocence, claiming that a shaggy-haired stranger shot them. The 2 surviving children were placed in foster homes, later adopted with a court order restricting Diane from seeing.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Megs, Megan, or Spooky, whichever you like to call me, and this is Spooky History with Megs. Remember in episode 1 how bad Susan Smith was? Well, get a load of this. This case is about Diane Downs, another mother from hell. Diane's story, however, draws close similarities to Susan's, but with the more sinister and crazy, gruesome details. And here is the story of Diane Downs. On May 13th, 1983, Diane Downs took her 3 children, Christy 8, Cheryl 7, and Danny 3, out for a fun afternoon. To commemorate the occasion, she had a unicorn statue engraved with their 3 names and the date. A mere 6 days later, one child would be dead and the other 2 in critical condition at the hands of the person who was supposed to love and protect them. Late on the night of May 19, 1983, a car pulls up to an ER in Springfield, Oregon, blowing the horn and a woman screaming her 3 children have been shot and she needed help right away. The staff quickly responds to the children and phones the police. A frantic Diane Downs demands use of the phone to call her mother. They find beds for the children where they discover Cheryl, age 7, has already passed away. Danny, age 3, was paralyzed from the chest down, and Christy, age 8, had suffered a stroke. Diane was wounded, only being shot in her left arm, but she had contained the blood loss by wrapping it with a towel prior to arriving to the hospital. Once the police were on the scene at the hospital, they tried to gather information from Diane. She told them that her and the children were sightseeing down backcountry roads after spending the day at a friend's home riding horses. Duran Duran's Hungry Like a Wolf was playing on the radio. Diane said the children began to drift to sleep when a man with straggly hair stood in the road in front of her. She stopped and asked what his problem was, and he pulled a .22 caliber handgun and said he wanted her car. He began shooting at the children. She froze and then tried to knock the .22 out of his hand. She then tried pretending to throw the car keys in the bushes, and he ran to get them, not before firing one last round into her arm. She started the car and got to the hospital as quickly as she could.
Can you tell us what happened on the night of May 19, 1983?
On the night of May 19th, 1983, my children and I went to see a friend to take her a newspaper clip. On the way home, a stranger was in the road. I stopped because he was flagging me, and I thought he was in trouble or thought that he was hurt. When I stopped, he approached the car, and by the time I got out of the car, he was standing beside the car, and he assaulted us. He asked for my car. And I made a smart remark, and perhaps I shouldn't have.
What smart remark? What'd you say?
Well, he said he wanted my car, and I said, "You've got to be kidding. That's crazy. You just don't do that." And so he assaulted me and my children, and from that point, I took the kids to the hospital.
Assaulted is a
Yeah,
very...
that's a nice way of saying
It's a mild
he shot
term
us.
for what happened.
Right, very mild, but I suppose you'd have to see things from my point of view. It's a very difficult thing. I very, very rarely talk about what happened that night because it is so painful.
Police immediately put out an APB on the supposed suspect and began looking for the 22. Police were also conducting interviews with Diane's mother, father, and ex-husband Steve. Something was not adding up with her version of the story, though. For starters, Diane, not once did she shed a tear even after learning that Cheryl had passed away. Danny's injuries were severe, and he was unable to give a statement as Christy was intubated in the ICU, so she couldn't be interviewed. Upon speaking with Diane's ex and father, they found out that Diane had access to several firearms, and one being a 22. Steve said she had it for about 6 months prior to the incident. The father even suspected Diane may have done it because she was only shot once in the left arm, and she was right-handed.
From the beginning, when you first heard that you had any doubts about her innocence?
Was there a time when I had doubts? Yes, there was. The first night, as a matter of fact, I had doubts. I felt, I sat and I sized up the situation, and I saw at one point that Diane had been shot in the, and everybody knows her as Elizabeth, but Diane had been shot in the left arm, and she's right-handed. And I made the comment to the police department there that night. It looks to me like Diane did it because the children have been shot in the chest and Diane has only been shot in the arm. And I says, it really looks like she did it. That really is the thing that spurred them to go and check, to do the Q-tips, run the Q-tips around her finger to check for the powder residue and to also spray her hands to see if she held a gun. So it was a good thing that I expressed that. And I'm a very open person. If I think that somebody did something, I'm not about to hesitate to say they didn't. You know, I'll tell them that I think they did.
Armed with this knowledge, the detectives asked if they could search her home. While searching her home, they found a treasure trove of evidence. Diane kept very in-depth diaries. She had tons of journal entries about a married co-worker that she was having an affair with in Arizona by the name of Robert Knickerbocker. Diane had moved back to Oregon in hopes that Robert would leave his wife for her and relocate to Oregon to be with her. She had been back in Oregon for months, and Robert had no plans on joining her and no interest in being a father. So much so, he had a vasectomy at age 21. The police noted that several firearms were in her home, but the 22 was nowhere to be found. One more piece of information was discovered. It was the unicorn statue that had been engraved with the three children's name and the date, May 13th, 1983. Gathering this information, police wanted to lock her into a statement early so they could see if the forensics would match her account of the story. They filmed her doing the reenactment of the events. It was chilling, to say the least. She was checking her hair and makeup while giggling through the whole process.
Sitting in the car is Elizabeth Diane Downs, one of the victims of this murder.
I'm throwing the keys, okay? I'm throwing the keys.
Simulating.
Yes, I go like that. I got in the car, jumped in, put the keys in. I just hit my cast. Started the car and left. The car door shut itself.
She didn't stop there. She made the press rounds. She was telling her story over and over and over and over again to anyone willing to
I've
listen.
been through that night so many times. I've even been through it with my psychologist. It's very hard. It's very tearful. There are a lot of memories that, I don't know. A lot of people, when something traumatic happens to them, they suppress it immediately. I kept those memories because I knew that I was the only person that was going to be able to tell them what happened when we got to the hospital. And when I got there, the first thing I said was call the doctors. Second thing was the blood type. Third thing was call the cops because they've got to find him. And so I had to remember as much as I could remember.
Her story would change from time to time, and police were quick to notice. Her ex, Robert, would record every conversation she had with him and turn it over to the police. Meanwhile, Christy is getting stronger, and the staff began noticing that Christy's vital signs would skyrocket anytime her mother visited her. Eventually, Diane was forbidden to visit either child. As Christy grew stronger and began trusting the therapist, she finally pieced together the events of that night, but refused to name the attackers. Soon, though, she wrote her attacker's name on a piece of paper, placed it in a sealed envelope, and gave it to her therapist. The name on the paper was Mommy. Diane was soon indicted on 1 count of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. While out on bond awaiting trial, Diane found a handsome young professor and conceived another child. She appeared for court very pregnant. This is believed to be her attempt to gain sympathy from the jury. Diane was convicted on June 17, 1984, of 1 count of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. The conviction was sealed by testimony from her own daughter, Christy, who took the stand visibly shaking and scared as she recounted the acts done by her mother that fateful night. She watched her mother rub her belly and tap her foot to the beat of Hungry Like a Wolf as they played it in the courtroom. Diane was sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years. On June 27th, 1984, Diane Downs was induced and gave birth to a baby girl that was adopted by Dorothy Babcock and her husband. Christy and Danny were adopted by the prosecutor and his wife. That's not the end of the story. Diane Downs piled on several layers of clothes and jumped the prison fence to escape. She was found at another inmate's home with their husband. She has moved in with him. It was only 6 miles from the prison. She claims she only escaped to find the real suspect in the crime she was found guilty of. She still to this day has never admitted guilt or remorse for her crimes. She was denied parole in 2020. Now, if you want more details on this case, there are several of her interviews on YouTube as well as a movie. It's called Small Sacrifices by Anne Rule, the same true crime author that covered Ted Bundy. Stay tuned for episode 3, where I talk about another evil mother. Till next time, this is Spooky History with Megs. Bye, guys.